The views and opinions of the following show do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of News Talk 1450 WOL, Radio 1 Incorporated, or their management.
Welcome to Beyond Just Talk. This is a positive, inspirational, and thought-provoking program that discusses life and business topics from a solution-oriented perspective with your host, S.L. Young.
All right, welcome. It's another great day, and we're ready to discuss subjects that will make a difference in your day. This is the place that people connect, ideas are shared, and lives are enriched. My name is Stacy Young. My author's name is S.L. Young, but please call me Sly. Before we get started today, next week, my guest is a man who is recognized for his work and is someone that ensures that systems remain operational. For this week, we'll recap last week's show, have a conversation with my guest, Ryan Ryskamp, who is an entrepreneur, returning citizen, and Mission Launch Fellow. On last week's show, my featured guest was Dr. Robert W. Simmons III, who is the Chief of Innovation and Research at the District of Columbia Public Schools, DCPS. Dr. Simmons is a sought-after motivational speaker, teacher, urban educator, researcher, innovator in education, and an excellent role model. His adolescence background as a black male isn't unlike many other young men who are allowed, they have their carefree ways to sometimes interfere with making good choices. However, the judicial system doesn't always work as it might be expected, especially for men of color. If the legal system has unmanaged prejudices and harsh penalties associated with certain minority groups, then the outcomes will be fairly predictable, which results in a continuation of the school-to-prison pipeline. But what if there were more diversionary programs that can help students with behavioral challenges to learn to be and do better? What if teachers had more freedom in their classrooms to use alternative ways to reach students instead of trying to identify methods to score higher on standardized tests that aren't always a good evaluation of knowledge, capture, retention, or future behavior? What if there were more non-traditional programs available for students who don't connect with the traditional method of instruction before a student becomes at risk? These questions and more need to be continually asked because the current educational system continues to fail way too many. Some of these considerations are the reasons that DCPS is actively working to recruit 500 mentors to be positive influences in young men's lives. The availability and connection of young men with mentors establishes positive relationships, which can have a significant impact on current and future behavior. Also, Dr. Simons and I shared that each of us has had at least one individual who pushed us to really consider our options for educational success, and at the same time prevented us from becoming another statistic. Dr. Simmons and the DCPS actively work to drive successful outcomes for all students, but are focused and committed to improving the educational statistics for minority males in particular. If you'd like to get involved with DCPS efforts to enhance the student experience, increase achievement, and prepare males of color for life, college, and careers, please visit the Empowering Males of Color in DC's website at emocdc.org or contact this organization on Twitter at EMOC_DC. If you'd like to contact Dr. Simmons, he can be reached on his website at Robert W. Simmons III. So that's Robert W. Simmons, that's SIMMONS III.com. If you missed our conversation, you can listen to it on my website at slyoung.com/bjt-radio.html. Also, if you'd like to read about my journey to overcome my learning challenges to become a college professor, inspirational speaker, and nonprofit founder, pick up a copy of my book, Above Expectations, My Story, An Unlikely Journey from Almost Failing High School to Becoming a College Professor. If you'd like to connect with me after the show, you can reach me on my website at slyoung.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/beyondjusttalk, one word, or locate me on Twitter, Google+, Instagram, and SoundCloud using the handle SLYoungVA. As for the rest of today's show, we'll learn about the temporary timeout my guest took before taking steps to improve his life and career options, discuss the challenges faced by returning citizens, learn about mission launch, its purpose, work, benefits, and challenges, and then obtain information about the Ban the Box initiative and the reasons that it's important for returning citizens. Before I introduce today's guest, I want listeners to know that if you'd like to join our conversation, please dial 1-800-450-7876. My guest today, Ryan Ryskamp, is an entrepreneur, returning citizen, and mission launch fellow. Mr. Ryskamp was in federal custody for 3 years for a nonviolent drug offense. While in custody, he continued to work on his personal development. In a chance meeting, he met a Mission Launch's co-founder, Teresa Hodge, which led to an opportunity to help returning citizens have a better life. Mr. Ryskamp is committed to helping and supporting returning citizens transition to the free society, including dealing with the emotional carryover for individuals formerly incarcerated and their families. Now, without further ado, I welcome my guest, who is a returning citizen who works tirelessly to give back, a Mission Launch Fellow, and an inspiring entrepreneur. Ryan Ryskamp, welcome to Beyond Just Talk.
Thank you, Sly. It's really a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you bringing me on.
Yeah, I'm really glad for you to be on and to share your story with our audience, because your story is not unlike many others that in America that either have had similar journeys or have had partial experiences with the correctional system or have family members. So to be able to talk about this in an open and honest way like you do is much appreciated, because it can help to educate all of us. But before we sort of jump into all of that, let's start with, who is Ryan Ryskamp?
Well, I always lead off to people that I'm an entrepreneur first. That's the biggest passion in my life. And I just happen to be a returning citizen. I'm someone that has been through the correctional system, and I am not even out of it yet. I'm still on probation, but I didn't let that stop me from chasing my entrepreneurial endeavors, preparing for it while I was incarcerated, and I'm pretty open about my story, and I think it's important to be, because there's a stigma associated with returning citizens in America that is going to be detrimental to the entire society if we don't take care of it right now. This is something that the society has to pay for unnecessarily for people that have wages of less wages because they've been incarcerated. They can't find work, and it's a community epidemic. It's not just an epidemic of individual people that have been incarcerated.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest challenges, just even before we get into your story specifically, but just talking about stigmas. Stigmas is one of those nasty things that nobody wants to have associated with them, but almost everybody has had something that's happened to them in their life that isn't going to display their finest moment. But it's amazing how quick folks can be to judge. When it's happening to someone else, then it's okay. But once it happens to you, then everybody suddenly wants forgiveness, right? Absolutely.
And I'll be the first to admit, this is the only reason I'm really into this particular topic is because I was incarcerated. I really didn't know anyone else prior to going to the system myself that had gone to prison or was even really greatly affected by it. What was interesting is I met these people and I realized I was maybe 2 degrees of separation away from them only after I disclosed my experience. And what it was people were hiding it. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a testament to why you have to be open with your story. You have to come out and not beg for forgiveness, but proclaim it, that I deserve to be forgiven. I have done the things that society and the judicial system have asked me to do, and leave it at that. And then you march on your way. And I think if you feel good about it, and you're going to find your place, you're going to find the people that are going to support you.
Right, and having that support system is really important. I was watching Locked Up Abroad this weekend, and I like to watch the Lock Up series. It's just interesting. And one of the guys that was on the show this past weekend said, I never thought that this would happen to me, but any of us can be one choice, one moment, 1 second away from our life changing. And once you cross that threshold, your life is never the same. And we'll talk about more of that a little bit later in some of your experiences. But I think the important thing about your story is that you're sharing your journey openly and being vulnerable enough to share it, which is going to help and inspire other folks to do better as well. And by owning it, I think it's the first step towards getting past it and on your step to doing things that are even bigger and better than the things that have happened to you in the past.
Absolutely. And my professional work is in branding. I mean, I do a lot of nonprofit work, but what my skill set really entails is I know how to brand. I know how to create audiences. And the number one thing that I tell my clients that I deal with right now is you have to tell the story first. You have to put a label on yourself, and that's uncomfortable, because we don't want to have a label. We want to be free, and we want to be able to change things up a little bit, But the fact of the matter is that if you don't tell your story or you don't put a label on yourself first, someone else is going to do it for you. And that's why you have the chance to put a positive label like returning citizen, even though that's not even perfect. Returning citizen isn't a perfect word, but it's a lot better than ex-con, felon, ex-offender. People in my situation that have been incarcerated don't want to be called that. So we started saying, no, we would like to be called returning citizen. That is the PC term that we prefer to be referred to.
Yeah, and just having something that isn't automatically associated with a negative term can make a huge difference in how folks perceive you, because as soon as you say, I'm a felon, I'm a convict, then there's automatically this negative stereotype or association that's associated with you, where that might have been a choice that you made at one moment in time, but it's not necessarily who you are today. Well, hopefully it's not who you are today as you tried to work to be better, because I think a lot of times what happens is when someone has something that has happened to them in the past, unfortunately, others use that as power over someone to hold them back versus saying, that's not necessarily who you are today. Let's look at who you are today. What have you been doing to make yourself better? And how can we help you to sort of move forward in the future?
Absolutely. Yeah, we like to equate it to you were once a high schooler. You might have gone to college. You might have gone to get a master's degree, but we don't still call you a high schooler because that period of your life is over with. And we shouldn't be called prisoner or ex-con or felon because that part of our life is technically over with. Yes, you do have something on your permanent record, but I don't call someone a misdemeanor. And, for some reason or another, that there's become a really, really negative stigma that's attached to the word felony. And when really all it is just a mark on a record.
Right. It's something that happened at one moment in time. It doesn't necessarily define who you are or who you will be. And that's important. But I think something else that you said earlier that I want to circle back to is you were talking about labeling yourself and telling your story. And I think that that's very important to be able to tell your story, because I know from my experiences, I've told a lot of personal stories about myself. And that was actually the thing that freed me the most, when I was no longer worried or concerned about others' evaluations about me. And then by sharing my story, what I realized is that I'm not the only one. There's a lot of other folks that are out there. So something like having someone in the family, whether it's a direct relative or a distant relative or a friend who's affected, or something like I've experienced with depression and near suicide or having educational challenges, once you own who you are, and you're comfortable with that, there's no other weapon that other folks can use against you.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, when you and I first met and I dug in a little bit more, I knew that you got it. I knew that you got the struggle because of your own journey. And you get it that, you have to do your story. You have to put it out there. And that's the most important part, to own it.
Yeah. We've got to own our struggle. So folks, we'll continue this conversation with Ryan after the break.
News Talk 1450 WOL AM, where information is power.
Good morning. This WOL traffic update is brought to you by Preparation H. We're doing pretty well right now on the outer loop of the Beltway, cleared out between College Park and Silver Spring. We're also doing pretty nicely on 295 north and southbound right now with no delays left, and we're in good shape on New York Avenue. Just the usual volume inbound as you head across the bridge down toward the 3rd Street Tunnel. Don't stand for hemorrhoids. Get relief with the power of 2 from Preparation H. Use fast-acting Preparation H medicated wipes, then longer-lasting maximum strength cream. Use as directed. Now your WOL weather forecast brought to you by Wendy's. For today, scattered showers this afternoon, a high near 90. Becoming partly cloudy overnight, down to 71. Tomorrow, partly cloudy early, then more scattered showers in the afternoon, a high near 84. Try Wendy's new Organic Honest Tropical Green Tea, made with freshly brewed, lightly sweetened green tea with hints of tropical mango and pineapple flavors. Only available at participating Wendy's. Try one today. Steve Hirschhorn for News Talk 1450 WOL, where information is power.
All right, folks, welcome back. I'm having a conversation with Ryan Ryskamp, who is a returning citizen, and we're talking about some of the challenges that he went through. And just we're doing this conversation to educate, inform, and also inspire folks who might be in a similar situation. So prior to the break, we were talking about the importance of owning your story and telling your story, because once you own your story and not allow somebody to use that against you, then that's a powerful first step for being able to move forward. So let's dig into your story a little bit.
Sure.
So how long did you spend in federal custody?
I was in custody for 3 years and spent majority of my time at Morgantown FCI, which is a federal camp / low. So it's considered a minimum. It's one of the few minimums in the country, which meant that it doesn't have a fence, but it's treated like a low. There's a difference between camp and low and how the security levels that are there. So with my experience there is that you had a lot of white-collar individuals. You had a lot of drug offenders. There weren't really any violent offenders there. So it was a pretty easygoing experience. And that is a large majority of the population. So that if you go back to stigma and you say, you should be afraid of every single person that's been to prison. It's not true. They've probably, honestly, been less at risk than you have in society, and you just don't have any violent incidents. Very few. But it's not like some of the shows that you talked about and that we watch, and we all like to have that voyeuristic that need. But they're not like all the MSNBC shows. They're not like Lock Up. They're not like Gangland. That's a very small sect of the criminal justice system.
But we also have to recognize that those shows are on to show us the things that are going to keep us interested so that we want to listen on an ongoing basis. So they have a strategic purpose in showing those things. Because they've probably filmed for thousands of hours, and this is what the edited reel is.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's certainly what's going to sell.
And so do you mind sharing with my audience the reason that you were in custody?
Sure. So I was convicted of conspiracy to distribute marijuana. Basically, for lack of better terms, my entrepreneurial nature has always been there. Mm-hmm. I never really got that great of a success when I was in the workforce. I have a college degree from James Madison University. Came out of school and I basically took a shot at the staffing industry. Did pretty well. And but just I always seemed to kind of not get along, and I was never 100% happy. And my superiors, they knew it. They always were able to come back and say, you either need to get with the program or you need to be more like these employees. And I was producing sales. I was always in sales, and I was always doing well. But there was always this divide between me and what seemed to be the culture of the organizations. And made some pretty critical decisions to do some of the things that I did, but in the end, I ended up serving 3 years for it, and I learned a lot. Honestly, some people might not want to go through what I did, but I wouldn't change it. I really, honestly, grew as a person more than I ever did. I learned more than I did in college. In 3 years of prison, I learned more than I did in college. That's a pretty amazing thing, just being able to just self-study and having access to all these individuals that have owned $1 million businesses or done amazing things.
And even before we get there, I just want to stop and reflect on what you just said. You said that you grew a lot more during the experience because you went through it. And I've had some experiences where I've gone through, and I know that I've grown because I've gone through it. So I sort of want to hear your perspective, and then we can sort of exchange some thoughts on why you feel better about it now.
Well, I've really thought about that a lot, especially after incarceration, and I've actually done some studies on it. There's some scientific studies about adversarial growth theory, and it's the idea that why do some people go through a very traumatic experience and come out better on the end? And it's only like a small sector of the population, like 10 to 20%, but there's studies about it because they want to figure out, okay, we have all these soldiers coming back from war, and they have PTSD, and they're committing suicide. I mean, it's sad to say, but I had a friend the other day commit suicide, and he was a soldier, and everyone thought he was happy, but he wasn't. And we want to figure out, and the scientists want to figure out, why does someone go through a traumatic experience, and what makes them thrive, and what makes them fall into a depression or have mental issues and emotional issues. And when I went into prison, I made the decision. When I was in jail, I was in county jail, and I made the decision that this is going to work for me. I don't care how long I stay in here, but I'm going to make it work for me. And it's not like there was, weren't ever any bad days. You have low days, but I journaled every day. I stuck to a core group of people. I was very, very close with my family. And I think that's important. You have to have somewhat of a link to the outside if you're going through any tough time. You got to have someone that will be able to pull you out of that pit. Mm-hmm. And, you find those people when I found them when I was in prison. I found them outside of prison. But I think you got to keep it productive, too. When progress has now kind of become my drug. Mm-hmm. I need it. I need to progress. I need to get better.
Right.
And I need it today. I need it even outside of prison. But keeping that mentality is what kept me so focused, and I feel proud of my experience there.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting listening to you sort of tell your story, because I went through a similar process when I was trying to overcome some of my life challenges. And the first thing that I associated with what you said was you made a decision to move forward, and you made a decision how you were going to handle it. Even though the situation happened, you weren't going to allow it to define what happened next.
Absolutely.
So first you made a decision. But the other thing that I think is interesting that you mentioned, actually, I want to laugh a little bit because you talked about journaling, because that was my outlet during my deepest periods of depression. I started writing, and I haven't stopped yet, because I find that it's a very therapeutic way to release those things that you might not otherwise process. Because as I was writing, and I'd be interested to find out if this happened for you, but as I was writing, then what happened was I started reflecting, and as I started reflecting, then I realized some other things, and then there was moments while I was writing that I sort of got emotional in the moment, but it was actually that moment that I grew.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. It's I used to always equate it to I can speak it, I can think it, I can write it, and if I write it, I'm literally thinking it, putting it onto paper, and reading it. I get 3 points of reflection right then and there. And if I speak it, I maybe get 1.5, because as I'm speaking it, it's going to be hard for me to really process it in my brain. And then if I just think it, I just get 1. Mm-hmm. So getting 3 points right there, you can literally go through a journal entry and at the end of it have given yourself the best advice in the world. And you feel calm, you feel comfortable. Nothing's perfect, but it does help you through that situation.
Yeah, and it's something else that you just said was very interesting, because what you described is one of the things that I will share with folks during my inspirational talks, where I tell folks you need to develop a self-talk. And so that was sort of part of the process. And what I tell folks is that you think it, and this is assuming that we say it out loud as well. So you think it, you speak it, you hear it, you process it. That's at least 4 times your brain is processing that. And then if you want to change your perspective on something, develop a self-talk so that it's something that you apply to your daily life, and you can do it like 2 or 3 times a day. And then now you're starting to multiply the number of times that you're reprogramming your brain. Absolutely. So I think that's a powerful tool.
And I think one thing to add, and I know that you go into institutions and you help some of the men out, and I would love to do that one day. And I just some of the challenges of my conviction lay in the way, but I'm going to figure out a way to do it. But I think learning, going into branding and trying to get a result for customers and trying to get a result from all my clients, specifically centered around internet marketing in the web, you have to look at previous records of what you've done. You need to figure out, okay, what it's called A/B testing, and really in the industry. So you need to figure out, if I do this, I get this result. If I do this, it changes the result. Mm-hmm. And something that I always found really helpful is that every quarter when I was in prison, I would go back and I look at all my entries. So that's another thing to do. It provides you a record of how you've been feeling emotionally and how you've been feeling mentally, because we say that we want to feel a certain way. We say that we want to act a certain way, but are we actually doing it? And this gives you an actual record to go back and say, wow, you know what? I have changed, and it makes you feel better.
Right. Well, beliefs are a powerful thing, and we could just have a whole conversation about that, but I won't get into that right now. But, one of the other things that you were saying is that you have this desire to give back, and that is also a very important tool in recovery and getting better. And who better to teach someone who's going through these challenges than someone who's actually been through it. So right. I think it's commendable that you're thinking about that and trying to figure out ways that you can do it. You might not be able to go into a correctional facility to do it, but there's other ways and other organizations that are outside of that, similar Absolutely. To what you're doing now. But I also want to sort of have a conversation about your journey, because it's not often that we can speak to someone who's so open and honest about their experiences, because I'm sure a lot of folks want to know what the process is like from the initial moments of incarceration. So what was going through your mind at that, those initial moments when you're like, I am caught?
You're in absolute disbelief. You really have no idea. And I'll be honest, I had pretty much accepted the fact that I was going to do some jail time. Mm-hmm. It's hard for some people to believe, looking at me, having conversations with me. Because I don't look like a criminal, quote unquote. I look like a person that's just walking down the street.
But what does a criminal really look like?
And that's, I guess that's when we go back to stigma and things like that. And so, I knew that I was going to do some jail time. Mm-hmm. And I just knew it. When the lights went on behind me and I got pulled over, and there was way more than one officer there, and there was different cars that were unmarked, that was a real feeling for me, for thinking that maybe I'm going to do more time than I really was prepared for, and it turned out I was going to do that. I had basically triggered the attention of the federal government, and yeah, they don't play around. This is time that they are definitely going to go after you for, and it's time to get serious.
Well, it's interesting because I do research on all of my guests, and I did a little background checking on you, and I was surprised when I saw a federal press release on you.
Oh, yeah.
And they said very clearly what you did and what happened, but you admitted to what you did the entire time, and you didn't go through the court system in terms of going through a trial. What you did was you entered a plea.
Correct.
Instead of going through it. So, I mean, there's something to be said about you admitting to what you did and not going through that process, but there's probably reasons that you did that as well. So once you were in jail, and you talked about a little bit about your journaling that you were doing, and you were reading a little bit. What else were you doing to sort of cope?
Well, journaling and reading, and honestly trying to stay active, fit.
Exercise.
Right. I was a personal trainer prior to going to prison, and that helped me out when I was there. I was lucky to have some pretty decent equipment in Alexandria County Institution. That's where all the federal prisoners are held for the most part. So yeah, it was pretty much every day. I would write, I would read, and I would draw some. I'm an artist as well, and I would work out.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. So one of the things that I would like to have a conversation with you after the break is about what were some of the educational programs and experiences that you had while you were in the jail to get better, because a lot of us want to know what programs are available for inmates to make sure that they're going to be better after they get out of jail.
Absolutely.
So we'll continue that discussion after the break.
News Talk 1450 WOL AM, where information is power.
This report brought to you by Maryland Auto Insurance. If you've ever been turned down or canceled by car insurance companies, check out Maryland Auto Insurance. They'll insure you guaranteed. Find an agent at mymarylandauto.com. D.C. police are releasing images of 6 persons of interest in the fatal shooting of a man near the Shaw-Howard Metro Station.
With the quality of video that we're releasing today, we're asking that anybody that has additional information on any of these individuals, please contact us.
Police Chief Kathy Lanier says Matthew Shlonsky was not the intended victim when he was killed Saturday along 7th Street Northwest. She says a car linked to the shootings has been recovered. Shlonsky, a 23-year-old from Ohio, had worked as a Senate intern. The man who gained worldwide attention a few years ago when he was pulled over while dressed as Batman has died. Lenny Robinson was fatally struck by a passing car Sunday night on I-70 near Hagerstown, where his Batmobile broke down. The driver stopped and has not been charged. Lori Strongen is with Georgetown University Hospital.
He would drive up in his car, and everyone would reel out there in their wheelchairs or drag their IV poles out there or run out if they could and just sit in the Batmobile and push the buttons.
Robinson of Baltimore County was a successful businessman who used his money to assume the Batman character and visit sick children in Maryland and all across the country. The trial for the director of security for the Baltimore Ravens is underway. A jury was picked yesterday in the case against Darren Sanders, who is accused of groping a female stadium employee last year after a game in Baltimore. His lawyer is Andrew Alperstein.
We're going to cause doubt in the case. The accusations in this case are unsubstantiated. They're uncorroborated.
Sanders has pleaded not guilty to sex offense and assault charges. This report brought to you by Mothers Against Drunk Driving, supporting the victims of drunk driving, drugged driving, and underage drinking at no cost. Call the 24-hour victim helpline, 877-MAD-HELP, or visit mad.org. I'm John Lewis. When you're looking for news from Black America, go to news1.com.
Welcome back to Beyond Just Talk with your host, S.L. Young.
All right, folks, welcome back. We're having a great conversation today with Ryan Ryskamp, and he's a returning citizen and mission launch fellow. And before the break, we were talking about some of the things that he was doing to occupy his time. And just sort of moving along just a little bit, is there something that you wish you would have known prior to going to jail that would have prepared you for the experience as you were going through it?
Yeah, how to slow myself down and be with myself, because there's a lot of time when you are in society, I guess you would say. Sounds weird for me to say it right now, but when you're just in a community, you have people all around you, and you have opportunities to interact with them, but you don't often get the time to just sit with yourself and think of Eastern cultures or meditation or yoga, things like that, where you really try to become in tune with your thoughts, with your body, and the way that your general being is. And you don't get the opportunity to do that if you're just
don't get or don't take.
Don't take. You're right. You certainly don't take it. And I guess that's what I wish I would have known, is that, or I wish I would have experienced that prior to, so it wasn't so intimidating. I mean, I'm glad I learned it. Mm-hmm. I still meditate to this day, mm-hmm. But that right there got me through a lot, just being able to sit there with my own thoughts.
But sometimes when we're alone with ourselves, it can be sometimes the scariest place to be.
It is, yeah.
Because there's a lot, well, I won't say a lot, there's some folks who will always make sure that they're surrounded by other folks and a lot of busy activities because they don't want to be alone. They don't want to have those deep thinking conversations about life, about spirituality, about who they are, what their purpose is. So getting to a place where everything is slowed down for you, then it gives you opportunities to maybe think about some of the things that you hadn't experienced before. Because I know some of the guys that I deal with in the jail, they talk about meditation, they talk about religion, and it's interesting how many folks find religion once they go to jail. But the other thing is, the guys that I deal with, I know that they're really intelligent, they want to learn, and they're looking for ways to be better once they come out. So while you were in jail, other than the things that you were doing on your own, what type of programs were available for you?
So in the actual jail, there's next to no programs.
Really?
Yeah. At the time that I was in Alexandria, there was next to no programs. You had your basic needs. You had your GEDs, GED programs that you could opt in or opt out of. For me as a federal inmate, knowing that they were going to transfer me out, I'm not sure if I just wasn't privileged to them. I tend to think that I could take them whenever I wanted, but there just wasn't a lot of programs there. And even when I got into the federal system, to be totally honest with you, there's not a lot of good programs. There's a very big divide between the purpose, the quote unquote purpose of going to an institution and getting rehabilitated, and the agency, the Bureau of Prisons, that is supposed to carry that purpose out. They have there's two different agendas. Mm-hmm. One of them is the Bureau of Prisons. It's a job for however many people are employed as correctional officers. They come in, they get a paycheck, they get a pension after about 20 years, and that's how they do it. They're not there to make you a better person. They're there to make sure they feed their family.
Yeah, it's punitive in nature.
Absolutely.
But you said there's another side to it too, right?
Yeah, there's the inmates. The inmates are the ones that want to get better themselves, and they want to teach others, So there were times when I took my personal training knowledge and I approached someone that I wanted some information from because they had been a successful business person, and we said, let's trade. I will show you how to work out properly and not hurt yourself and achieve the results you want, and you help me with what you can and help me achieve the results that I'm looking for.
And I think that's important when you take whatever environment that you're in and look for opportunities to learn and make yourself better. Because some folks might think, oh, there's just a bunch of criminals in the jail. They're not doing anything productive.
Absolutely.
But there are things that happen in there where folks are trying to prepare themselves as they come out. So at the Alexandria jail, you didn't have things to do or didn't pursue them because of your status. What about once you got to the federal level? Anything changed?
Yeah, there were some changes. I mean, you definitely had more structured programming. You had, I became a GED teacher, so I was involved in that, and I saw it, and it was a bittersweet experience because I loved working with the guys that needed the help, and they really responded well. But there is some bureaucracy that you have to deal with. There is the person that runs the program that is technically a correctional officer, and they have their desires and how they want it to be run. And if it's not run that way, even if you're getting a good result, kind of takes me back to all of my time in corporate America. It just didn't quite work out. So I don't know why I was gonna do that well with another boss.
But it's not going to stop you from trying, right?
Yeah, it didn't stop me from trying. It didn't stop him from gently letting me move on to another position either.
Right. And so one of the things that I think is important to mention also is that you're college educated, right?
That's correct, yeah.
And so you have a bachelor's degree in communications, is it?
Bachelor's degree in communications. Was a concentration in public relations, and have done a lot of coursework in media arts and design.
So let's fast forward towards the end of your time in jail or in prison. So how did you prepare to return to society? Was it something that you did alone, or were there things that the prison did to help you to transition?
So there certainly were things that the prison did to help you transition. I don't believe that they were effective, but it's a mandate, and they have to carry out the program. To be honest with you, if you're going to, anyone of your listeners is going to go to prison and they know it, you prepare today. And that's one thing I learned is that you prepare before you go. You get your affairs in order, things like that. And then when you get there and time slows down. Right, if you have time, and even if you don't have time, that should be your priority towards your family. Figuring out, okay, like you sell your car because your car's not going to be worth nearly anything when you come out because it's going to be so old, or it's going to have aged a few years. I mean, these are just things that they've built a whole entire business around with prison consultants because it is so detrimental, and you're so emotionally charged that you forget to do these things that if you just stop and think logically, you would say, wow, yeah, I do need to do that. But we are so wrapped up in the moment. But I think you prepare the day one. You have to, the first day you're locked up, you got to make a decision. What am I going to be like when I get out of here? Okay. And then reverse engineer that. How does that look? How does that look day in, day out? What do you need to be? What do you need to do? And you use things like resources like journaling, and you try to, police yourself as much as you possibly can. And hopefully you end up, how you envision it on the other side.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. What I'm hearing you say without saying it is it's about planning. And planning is something that we should do in all areas of our life. But if you're going to jail, you still need to work on a plan. So whether you have a plan for your life once you get out, hopefully you're going to get out someday, have that plan, have a plan for education. So what can I do to better myself while I'm in here? What programs are available? Are there extended learning distance courses that I can take to obtain a college degree? Financial planning, what am I going to do with what I have that's already out here, but also what am I going to do in the future once I get out of here, if there's any ways for me to earn money in terms of taking on a job in jail. But also the other piece is career planning and figuring out what it is that I want to do next. So you had some things that you were doing outside other than, so you weren't just into the criminal activity prior to going in jail. You actually had some entrepreneurial activities as well, right?
That's right. I had a clothing business that I ran for about 3 to 4 years prior to being arrested that was starting to do okay. It basically come out of the red, and I was starting to make a little bit of profit a year. It was a hobby, I think more so because obviously my full-time and responsibility was around the criminal activity. But I also did some personal training prior to prison, and I picked that up honestly the day about a week after I got arrested, because I knew that I needed some sort of means to make an income after I got out, and that was one of the things that when I did my research, that there was no bar or law place that you couldn't become a personal trainer. There's some weird laws out there, and for one of them is that you're not allowed to be a barber in some jurisdictions
because you are a convicted felon.
That's right, which is the most. That's a very hostile thing to do.
Well, there's a lot of interesting laws that are still on the books, right?
Right, yeah.
In terms of getting yourself prepared for coming out, did you see any employment services like connecting you with potential employers in the state that you were going to go transfer to, or saying, here's a job placement firm that's in the state that you're going to go to help you make those connections before you get out? Because I would think if someone's been in jail, let's say 5-10 years, and maybe they've gone through all of their living expenses because they used it to cover their case, and now they're going back to the outside world, and they don't have any money or any options for a job, and in some cases they're limited because of having this felony. So what type of real preparation do they do to help folks to be successful? Because otherwise, what other choice are folks going to have?
Right. This might surprise you, but next to none. There really is no structured programming. Even there's really no, the correctional officers are going to help you out on a personal level either, because their job's at risk if they do so. And I'll never forget it, but I had one of my best friends while I was incarcerated. He was an attorney, and he served his time, and he was speaking to his advisor or his counselor, whoever the equivalent of that would be, and he was saying, she was saying, you need to try to line up and get a job and things like that. And he said, well, yeah, I'm talking to this person. It was in corporate America. And he still had some good friends there. And she said, no, those are the wrong types of jobs. And finally they went back and forth, and she admitted to him that, I want you flipping burgers. I'll never forget it, that he said that. And he's doing really well now. I receive updates from his wife because technically I'm not allowed to have contact with anyone who has a felony on their record. But she says that he's doing really, really well, and he's not flipping burgers, thank God.
Right.
Because he's a very smart person. He's got a lot to offer. He actually became the CTO of a company.
Well, it's sort of interesting that you bring up that you're not allowed to have contact with someone who's had a felony conviction, because folks don't necessarily know some of the rules once you get out. But one of the other things that I find is interesting is someone who goes into a correctional facility to teach, that because I have a level of power over the folks who are taking my class, even though I don't really have any power over them, they're just attending my class.
Sure.
But because I was, a volunteer inside of the jail, I cannot have any contact with them.
Which is amazing,
in the future.
Because how are they going to continue to get better?
Yeah, it's sort of interesting, some of the rules that we have. Right. All right, folks, let's take another break, and we'll be back in a moment.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
Good morning. This WOL traffic update is brought to you by Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Outer Loop northbound on the Beltway at Central Avenue, 214. It was an accident, moved quickly over to the safety zone, but you'll slow down to see what's going on. Still very slow northbound on the BW Parkway, heading up from the Beltway to Powder Mill Road, where the accident was cleared a while ago. Mothers Against Drunk Driving supports the victims of drunk driving, drugged driving, and underage drinking at no cost. Call the 24-hour victim helpline at 877-MAD-HELP or visit mad.org. Now your WOL weather forecast brought to you by Horseshoe Casino Baltimore. For today, sunny and hot, a high around 95 degrees. Clear overnight down to the low 70s. Tomorrow, increasing clouds during the day, a high near 90. Gamble on table games like Let It Ride and Big Six at Horseshoe Baltimore with highest limits and best odds. No when to stop. Before you start, please play responsibly. For help, visit mdgamblinghelp.org or call 1-800-GAMBLER. Steve Hirsch for News Talk 1450 WOL, where information is power.
All right, folks, welcome back to Beyond Just Talk with S.L. Young. We're having a conversation with Ryan Ryskamp, a returning citizen and mission launch entrepreneur, or actually fellow and aspiring entrepreneur, even though he's done some things that have been entrepreneurial in the past. And so we were talking about some of the things that folks do for training and education and to hopefully get better. But what we're finding out from Ryan is that there aren't really a lot of things that are necessarily happening in the jail. So I want to just take a moment and sort of plug that if anybody's interested in going into a correctional facility to volunteer their services, if you have specific skills and services that you can offer to these inmates, let me tell you from firsthand experience, you will get people in your classes. I teach introduction to business, I teach soft skills, I teach life skills, I discuss communication skills, and I have anywhere from 16 to 30 guys that are in my class. 16 if they have to physically come up and come see me, which I actually appreciate more because I know that they're more interested. But if I teach in a housing unit, I can have about 30 guys. And these guys are definitely interested, and they're asking me about other things that I can bring in because they want to learn. So don't get the impression that folks in jail don't want to learn and don't want to get better. Don't fool yourself. These folks have similar dreams and aspirations. They just got caught up in a moment, and they're trying to get out of it now so that they can have a good life when they get out of it too. Would you agree with that, Ryan?
Absolutely. I think personally, I think that that you have higher aspirations than the typical person in society, because going through something like that, it opens your eyes up and it makes you hungry. It makes you really, really desire a change in your life, and to have a positive direction like that, man, that's priceless.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let's talk about at the end of your sentence, because I just can't even imagine spending 3 years in federal custody, and now it's 30 days, 2 weeks, 1 week, hours before I'm getting out.
Right.
What does that feel like?
It is surreal. I mean, you really don't. It didn't sink in. It's still. I mean, I'm still not 100% back.
And how long have you been out?
For 2 years.
Okay.
A little over 2 years.
Okay.
So I don't think you'll ever really get it all back until you get off probation.
Yeah.
And currently, right now, I don't know how much probation I have left. The federal government is out of money, as we all know, but you typically get half of your probation than what is actually sentenced to you. So I passed my halfway point on May 20th. So I'm looking at maybe any day now. Maybe I stay on for the full term. I don't know, but that's kind of the situation I'm in. But I don't think you ever really 100% come back until you get through 100% of the system.
Mm. And actually, I want to circle back for a moment, because one of the things that I meant to ask you earlier, so you come out of jail, you're a convicted felon. Are there limitations that are placed on you in terms of what you can and cannot do?
Absolutely. Yeah, you are, obviously you have to put in requests to travel. You can't just travel freely.
For the rest of your life?
While you're on probation.
While you're on probation.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
And then for the rest of your life, too, I mean, there are some countries that won't let you in.
Wow.
Australia being the most ironic one, because it was founded on basically, Britain sending their prisoners there. They will not let you in, no questions. Right. There's no way that you can get in there. South Africa is another really stringent one. And then, there's some other ones that you wouldn't even really expect. Canada being very hard to get into with the felony.
Wow. Those are things that I never thought about. And one of the other things we're going to talk about is employment, but I want to hold off on that for just a moment. So what did you do on your first day out of jail? What did you do? Did you scream when you walked out of jail?
Well, it's kind of weird. Like it would be great if everything just ended that one day. But, I see why they don't do it, because some people might self-destruct. You have so much energy that you almost need to be kind of eased out of it. But my first experience, I left the jail, or I'm sorry, I left the prison, and I got into my parents' car, and they drove me to a halfway house in Norfolk. So I stayed there for 3 months until they let me go on to home confinement, and I stayed on home confinement for 3 months. So the first day I was actually out, able to do whatever I wanted. I'll be honest with you, I went out and bought an iPhone. I don't know, like,
you're addicted like everybody else,
right? And I guess maybe I was just like, I felt bad that I'd been missing out on this stuff the whole time, because you're not allowed to have, obviously, you can't have cell phones and things like that in prison. And we weren't even allowed to have them in the halfway house. Now I think they've started to realize that they need to change those laws. And some halfway houses are letting you have cell phones because you got to get a job. You got to be able to be, called back. So.
Yeah, you got to have contact somehow.
Correct.
And then, so what are some of the biggest adjustments that you had to make after release?
Traffic was one of them, even though when I came back, I was like a Zen monk. I mean, I would drive around and I don't care who got mad at me. I was happy just to be driving, and it wasn't scary or anything like that, but I would imagine that you're dealing with the amount of people, you're dealing with the technology, and then you got these little things that kind of pop up that people don't necessarily understand. For instance, like if I hear keys still to this day, I get a little tinge of that feeling being back in prison, because when the correctional officers would walk around, their keys would purposely, not purposely, but they would bang on their leg. And that's how we all knew that they were coming, So, you learn pretty quickly, like if someone was going to do something wrong or not against the rules in prison, even if you're doing everything right, you just knew the guards were coming when you heard the keys. And it's not, you heard it at night, you heard it when you slept. So it's something that that still affects me today. But you have little things like that, it's not like the best thing to talk about,
right.
but it's real. That's what the reality is.
Well, it's interesting because even in my preparation for our conversation today, one of the things that I didn't even consider were the psychological effects of coming out of jail and how long that might last with someone. And it sounds like this is something that you're still dealing with today. So how do you manage it?
How a big way that I managed it is I found someone. I found a nonprofit through Mission Launch, and that I started doing a lot of work with when I came out. And there was an individual named Teresa Hodge, and she had been to prison, and she was the vice president of this organization. And she kind of mentored me, counseled me, was my emotional support, because you can't go to your loved ones because they haven't been to prison. They don't know what you're going through. And to kind of tell them all this crazy stuff that is in your head makes them uneasy, and you don't want to cause them any more stress.
Right. And they don't get it.
They don't get it, and Teresa, having gone through the process, she gets it. She got it. Because she was working at a nonprofit, I was able to get my probation officer to agree to let me do some work there. And then, in doing that, I was able to gain, a true friend, a mentor, and like I said, a counselor.
But the one thing that I really want to stop and point out right now is how important this conversation is, because just by telling your story, giving your testimony, you don't know who you're helping. You don't know whose life you're changing. You might prevent somebody from going to jail. You might help somebody who's just gotten out of jail to say, hey, there are opportunities. Look at this guy. He's on the radio. He's telling his story. He's working with an organization to give back. So your story is powerful in that you give somebody else hope. And at the same time, you help yourself, because as you deal with these things that you've shared with us today, it makes it easier for you, but then you also recognize your value. So I hope you understand that.
Absolutely. No, I totally do. Yeah.
And so let's talk a little bit about your work and your experiences. So you're a fellow over at Mission Launch. So what is it that you do over there, and what has that organization done for you? And what have you done for others as well?
Yeah, so Mission Launch has been a huge part of my life coming out of prison because I wanted to jump right into entrepreneurship. And I did so. I did a Kickstarter campaign to try to get my clothing company back on the ground. And it went okay, but in the process, I was at a co-working space and I met Lauren Hodge, who's the CEO of Mission Launch. She is the daughter of Teresa Hodge, who's the vice president. And it quickly, we quickly figured out that both I had been to prison and Teresa had been to prison, and that we needed to link up right away because I had some, I had some debts to settle, with myself pertaining to the system and pertaining to some of the guys that I'd really befriended while I was away, and I wanted to make a difference, and they wanted to make a difference too. So it was a great match. So I volunteered for a long time, and then finally I was able to. They asked me to apply, and I applied, and I became a Mission Launch Fellow, in which they helped me develop some skill sets, and out of those skill sets, I really honed my freelance business for branding, and so. Going forward, the next step right now is going to be I'm just volunteering right now in the capacity. My fellowship ended recently, and even though it ended, I'm excited because Mission Launch just publicly received a grant from the SBA to do an accelerator, and I'm going to apply to that, and I'm going to try to be the first person that goes through that program and to build that freelance business that they've kind of helped me build, and still, support me with mentorship and advice on how to build that. They're going to, I think that they can help me turn that into a branding agency.
Yeah, and one other thing that I want to cover real quick, because we're starting to run out of time, is about getting a job.
Right.
Was it difficult for you to identify opportunities to get a job?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I didn't have any success with being employed by someone else. And
because of the felony conviction.
Right. Yeah.
And real quick, folks, I want to make sure that everybody is aware that there's an initiative called Ban the Box that is going around the country right now. And it's a very important initiative that removes the box so that felons don't have to check it to reveal that they have a conviction during the initial phase of the application screening process. But at this point, I've enjoyed this conversation, but unfortunately we're going to have to leave it here because we've about run out of time. So Ryan, thank you very much for sharing your story.
I appreciate it.
I hope that you enjoyed today's show. On next week's show, my guest will be Jeff Stovall, who is the Chief Information Officer for the City of Charlotte, North Carolina. He's a respected leader who keeps the city's information accessible, ensures that its data is protected, and leads the business planning and digital strategy to achieve the city's strategic goals. Remember, your candle is fueled from within, so don't let anyone reduce or block the fuel to maximize its brightness. Enjoy the rest of your week. Until next time, my friends, have a good one.
News updates on the web at WOL DC News.com.